Hello and welcome to Melee's Turn Wheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series, chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I main Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapter 8 of Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. This chapter isn't, I think it's going to be a short episode, which is nice compared to the behemoth that last chapter was. I mean, the chapters aren't that much longer. This chapter isn't really any shorter. In fact, I think it might be longer than the other one, but I think that it's there's less to talk about for sure. There's a lot less meat to chew on here. This feels like very much a filler chapter. That's not to say that there's nothing to talk about, but since we don't, we're doing news at the end now, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't just jump right into it. So here's chapter 8, The Dragon Knights of Thracia. So this chapter, despite the name, focuses on reconquering the rest of the Manster district is apparently what it's referred to as, which is the northern half of the Thracian peninsula. But it does feature a lot of story and characters about Thracia. We get some lore about how Thracia is a harsh wasteland where it's difficult to grow food. And I mean, some of this comes in bits and pieces throughout the chapter, but you're basically given the idea that living in Thracia is like a real shitty lot in life. They don't have it easy. They had to turn to mercenary work to make money so that they can feed their families and stuff like that, which actually reminds me a lot of Ilia from the Elite games 6 and 7. They don't really use that for anything interesting. It might come up in a few supports, but the idea that, it's a barren, snowy wasteland, I guess in Thracia's case, it's more like mountainous and like craggy sort of rock wasteland. But in both cases, there's not a lot of agricultural prospects, so the main export is mercenaries. And in Thracia's case, it's the driving conflict of their role in the story and is incredibly, you know, it's the reason that Quan died. It's the reason that Leaf is, big part of Leaf's character and Finn's character for that matter, and is also a central conflict in the next game. Whereas in Alib, they barely do anything with it at all, which I think is interesting. I'm curious to see if and how that comes up in 6 and 7. But the the this is sort of what I was talking about. I don't remember in chapter 5 I talked about Trevant and how I liked his character a lot. I liked him as a villain a lot because he checked off all my boxes for what I consider to be a good villain, but I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the sympathetic part. One of the things I said that I enjoy in a villain is if they're sympathetic and you can understand why they're doing bad things. It's not a necessity. I think you can have a good villain that isn't like that, but it's nice. It helps flesh them out and make them feel more like an actual person instead of just a evil incarnate sort of villain. I didn't talk about it much because I said it would come up later if I'm remembering correctly. That's what happened. And this is the later. This is where it comes up because Trevant is an incredibly ambitious man and he's willing to do a lot of terrible things. But at the end of the day, it's all for this reason, pretty much. He feels like he is entitled to a better life than what he had for both him and his people, the Thracian people, because they have had it so rough in the past. And I like it because it does a really good job of explaining Trevant's actions without necessarily trying to justify them. Like the game says many times, like, yeah, Thracia's got it real shitty and they don't have a lot of resources, but Trevant has killed a lot of people and has done some real bad things. So I don't know. I like the way that this game handles Trevant tremendously. I think that he is a well written, intimidating villain that really makes you hate him and has relatable motivations behind his actions, even if that doesn't necessarily make them good or okay. You can understand why he does them. I think that's just the framework for a really good villain. And it's also worth noting that the Manster district is comparatively described as being rich with life, which Brings to mind like a Hoshido Nor situation. God, man, if I didn't get flack for comparing this game to Awakening last time, I'm gonna get flack for comparing it to Fates this time. But don't worry, I'm not gonna. Even in my wildest fever dream, I could not argue that Fates does a better job with anything in its story than this game or any game ever created. So I'm just saying that I think that this is an example, honestly, if anything, how you do it right. It's still not quite there. I think maybe they could have made the Manster District maybe a little bit less idyllic. Again, similar to Hoshido, how it's like, they try to play up as, oh, they hog all their resources, but then you go there and it's like a paradise and everyone's so happy and nice to each other. And it's like, all right, if they were maybe a little bit more imperialistic or a little bit more conservative with their resources, then maybe I could see it. But nothing that the Manster District ever does is portrayed in anything other than a great, like, oh, these were the glory days when Quan was in charge of Leinster and all that. I guess Quan was never in charge of Leinster, his dad was, but you know what I mean. In the ensuing years after the Battle of Valhalla, Thracia invaded the Manster District and actually won. I mean that's we saw them kill Quan. We heard about them taking over Leinster. They won. They basically had it under their thumb. But then Bloom showed up and whipped their asses and drove them out of there. So now they're just looking for an opportunity to get this land back, which they are given when Selef shows up, beats Bloom, and now they're like, okay, well, we're gonna let them fight each other and pick off what's left, which never seems to work out well for the people planning it. At least not in like stories. Maybe this was a good tactic in real life, but uh, the only other example I can think of is Game of Thrones, where they do this in season 8. Cersei does this in season 8, and it does not. We will say end well for her. Yeah, the Trevant's kind of dumb here. I don't know. I don't know what his problem is. He's being needlessly antagonistic, and probably Selleck probably would have just left him alone. Or if, maybe Leaf probably would have gone and done something about him, but that's a lot easier to deal with in the entire Liberation Army. I don't know. I mean, we don't know what happened, right? But I just feel like Trevant was being reckless. I mean, I guess that's the point, right? His ambition was his downfall, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's next chapter. We see a cutscene of Sed in Manster, and they're talking about how the Liberation Army is coming, that they're gonna get out of there. It's just an indication that Sed's there. His whole like freedom fighter thing that he has going on in this chapter is really cool and is like a central part of the plot of FE5, which I'm excited to get to because Sed's a phenomenal character. He's one of my favorites in the game, and yeah, I just think that that's interesting. But we don't really see much of it this time. And that's how the chapter starts. I mean, they're just talking about how they're going to go fight Bloom and then free Manster, I guess, is their plan. And then Thracia attacks them and they're forced to retaliate. So the chapter starts, and immediately what caught my attention was this music, which you'll have heard already. Reminds me a lot of FE12 music. There's a specific song that it reminds me of. I say FE12, I mean like FE3 slash FE12. I'm more familiar with FE12. Marth's second games. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure the one I'm thinking of is called Advance, which is I believe the first map theme in the game. Um, but I'll put it in the episode so that you guys can hear what I'm talking about. So that's the first thing that caught my attention. The second thing that caught my attention is something that really, really had me pull on a double take the first time I played this map, which is one of the mini bosses. I do not recall his name, nor do I particularly care, but he his portrait is identical to that of Chagall from chapter 2 and 3, which normally is not a remarkable thing. This game reuses boss portraits all the time. It's done in more time. This is one that appears almost every chapter of a guy with like short brown hair, kind of like poofed up a little bit. This is different because Chagall was like a major villain. It would be like if another guy rolled up with Arvis's exact portrait. I mean, I guess Trevant pretty much has that, but it's not like a recolor either. I mean, maybe the armor is slightly different, but the hair is exactly the same color. It's pretty much a copy and paste. Again, it's not a big deal. I just was like, wait, Why is Chagall here? What is going on? I legitimately thought that Chagall had come back, like, 17 years later. I was like, what the fuck? But no, it's just a weird portrait reuse for some reason. The beginning of this map is a little tricky. They send Finn, Leaf, and Nana up to Leinster, and they're gonna get bombarded by a bunch of Lance Knights with javelins. So you gotta send some people up to help them because there's no way they can hold that fort down by themselves. But also there's a group coming from the right, which isn't particularly threatening like immediately. You can put off dealing with them. But if you want to like run in and do some damage, they there's a lot of them and they can hit pretty hard. So it's not an easy. I had to restart this map a few times. There's only a couple places where I had to do that, but I ended up sweeping most of them with, if you can believe it, Julia. Julia with Nosferatu was incredibly useful this map. She's really coming into her own. She has good, decent stats now, so she can double. I mean, they were all armor knights, and I think, in fact, there were actually some that she didn't double, which is kind of sad. So she's not that fast, but she was holding her own, and she died in 2 hits, but she never got hit more than once before recovering it all back with Nosferatu. So that was nice. I like Julia. I like her a lot. So I enjoy using her quite a bit, especially when you get Nosferatu. If you get Aura, then she's just, I mean, she can hit like a truck, but she's kind of dead weight, at least on enemy phase. Now, there's a conversation here between Julia and Seliph, and it's confusing. I'm gonna bring it up and read it real quick. So she says, Lord Seliph, oh, Julia, has something the matter. She says, I'm scared. I sense an evil presence, something dark, and it's closing in. Seliph's like, what do you mean? And then the transcript says that she starts talking slowly, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know why it'd be any more slowly than before. It's just the same ellipses and everything. But she says, Seliph, be on your guard. Ishtar is a fierce foe. You cannot fight her. You must not. Julia, what's happening to you? And then she kind of snaps out of it and says, what in the world just? And then they kind of trail off. I'm confused by that on a lot of levels. First of all, Julia says, I'm scared. I sense an evil presence, something dark, and it's closing in. This could be a few things. I'm inclined to think this, for context, this is before Ishtar appears. So at first I was like, oh, is this Ishtar? But then when you beat Ishtar, Julius shows up and takes her away, which is, it's probably Julius that she's referring to here because he is, he's lopped here basically at this point. But what confuses me more than anything is it seems like she's being possessed here. It seems like Naga is kind of controlling her body and talking to Seliph through her as a vessel, which is weird. And this almost never happens again, at least not that I can think of. Anyway, it's not very common. I actually didn't realize this conversation was in the game, and I've never read it before, and it's interesting. I think this is a fun little Easter egg and kind of hints at some stuff that might be going on with the whole Crusader thing. I just thought I'd talk about it. Arthur and Fee have a cute conversation. Fee gets plus 3 HP and they get 100 love points. Not anything to write home about really, but it's cute. Like the dialogue's cute. Finn and Leaf have an amazing conversation here. This is what I was talking about. I remember I said I couldn't remember where this information came from, but stuff about Finn going hungry so to make sure that Leaf had plenty to eat. It comes from this conversation, and they're just really having a good bonding moment here. Leaf is like, I really want you to succeed. I really want you to live up to your father's legacy and his dream of uniting the peninsula in peace. It's cute. It's characterizes them both very, very well. It's part of the reason why I like Finn so much. I'm just trying to think, is there anything I'm skipping over? They're the sorceress sisters who are really easy to take down. I mean, if you let them get the jump on you, then they can take you out pretty easily. But you're probably gonna just run up and poke them with the Brave Lance or whatever, or someone who can use. I guess at this point you would only have Arthur who can use Forseti, but someone with a legendary weapon, maybe Ares. They're not that hard to take down. After a few turns, you are given a character. Well, you're not given a character, but a character shows up on the battlefield. It's either a Salo or Fivale, depending on whether or not you paired Brigid. For me, it was a Salo. You can recruit him by talking to him with Patty or Daisy, again, depending on who it is. So, a Salo is talking to Bloom. Bloom says, "Hey, if you fight for me, I will fund the orphanage that you work at, and they'll never have any problems with money ever again." And he's like, "All right, sure, fine. I want that. So let's go." And he joins up with Bloom, but Patty talks him out of it, or Daisy, and basically says, "Listen, he's the reason that they're orphans in the first place, you dumbass." And he's like, "Shit, I guess you got a good point there." And so he joins up with his sister in the Liberation Army. I realized actually that I skipped over something involving the Sorceress Sisters, and that is that they are actually capable. I think this is the case for a few other places as well, and I completely forgot to mention it until now. They can do a triangle attack. There are a few instances where you have like three. I think there's like three Pegasus sisters and three. I think the same three Sorceress Sisters in the last chapter. I think there's three more in Endgame. They can all triangle attack you, which is wild because this is the only time, to my knowledge, that the enemies have been able to do a triangle attack. And for even more craziness, it's in a game where the player isn't even given access to a triangle attack. There are no characters in this game that can do a triangle attack. So it's an enemy only thing, and these guys can do it, which is interesting. Again, though, I don't really see any reason why you would have to worry about that, especially since I think their AI is more inclined to attack you from a distance anyway, so they probably wouldn't be able to triangle attack you at any point anyway. Ishtar shows up and convinces Bloom to give her Mjolnir, and then takes to the battlefield. At this point, he doesn't have any particularly strong tomes to defend himself with, so he's pretty much easy picking. But you got to get past Ishtar first. While I was waiting for her to roll up and deal with her, I actually accidentally left a gap in my defenses, and for I believe the first time this playthrough, maybe the first time ever, at least that I didn't reset for. I just didn't care enough to bother, but I lost the castle, which when the castle's green and it gets captured by an enemy, it turns red and you can capture it and get more money. If it's blue and it gets captured by an enemy, it just is destroyed. And that's it. You've lost that castle. Can't do anything there anymore. Presumably everyone there's dead, which is kind of dark. And it was Leinster, which is really sad. Poor Finn, poor Leaf, they had just gotten it back and now it's in ruins, but whatever. Tomato, tomato. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Uh, Live and let live, maybe? No, I don't know. It is what it is. I think that's what I was looking for. It was sad. It was tragic, but I don't care that much. You get less money at the end of it, I think. Um, I also, the jury's still out. I have not figured out if that is like like you literally get funds added to you, if you have enough castles captured, or if it's just like in the story, Seliph gets paid, or at least Sigrid did back in Gen 1. I don't know if it's literal or not, or mechanical, I should say. So Ishtar rolls up. I think she's supposed to be hard, but I just kind of went up to her with Arthur, smacked her around a little bit. She has weapon triangle disadvantage, and it's holy weapon versus holy weapon, so I have a big angle there. And yeah, she was a pushover. Once you beat her, Julius shows up. And this is the first time, I believe, that we've actually seen Julius. I think we've heard about him. But this is the first time that we have seen Prince Julius, the heir apparent to the Grand Vale Empire. And he gets Ishtar out of there. He's like, you can't die here. I want you to live, so you're gonna live, yada yada yada. Has this like weird kind of aura about him. Not literally, I just mean like his theme song's kind of menacing. The way he talks is kind of spooky, you know, stuff like that. One of the villages around here gives you the power ring, which I got with Aira or Larce. I re-recorded this section and I made the same mistake earlier, but no, it's Larce. I like Larce. I'm going to continue to use her, even though she's not that good, and she wanted more strength, so I gave it to her. 5 extra. That's potentially 25 extra damage whenever she procs Astra. Potentially 50 extra damage because of when she procs Astra, she can proc it twice technically, but that's not likely to happen. There's a village here that I didn't actually do this with, but if you visit it with Asalo, he gets a cute little conversation with the girl who gives him some fruit, I guess, and I believe it gives him a strength buff. I think it's +3 or something like that. And I didn't get it. I didn't bother. I just wanted to get the money with someone else. But it's cute, and it's a nice way to give him a little bit of a buff because he's a substitute and therefore bad. I'm realizing I didn't really properly talk about Asalo. I just kind of said that I recruited him. But there's nothing really to talk about. He's bad. He's like if Jamp joined way later. I gave some credit to some of the units in the beginning of Gen 2 who were on foot because it wasn't quite horse meta yet. Uh, there were some characters who were on foot who still wanted experience and who still wanted to do things. But that time is over. Self promoted last chapter. I didn't mention it, but he did. Leaf promoted at the end of this chapter. A lot of my mounted units like Oifi and Finn and Diarmid and Nana are all getting stronger. And yeah, it's horse meta again. And I already, I said that I'm giving favoritism to Larce. I'm also giving favoritism to some other ones like Ulster and Shannon. Arthur, I guess, technically for now, Tinny for sure. But Asalo, I don't care enough about Asalo to do that for him. And he's also, like, at least those guys can, like, go into a group of units and attack them all. Whereas Asalo can't do that on enemy phase unless they all have bows. So yeah, unfortunately, Asalo is not that good as a character. I don't really have anything to say. He's like in charge of an orphanage and he wants to protect the kids. That's cool, respect. But there's nothing really else noteworthy about him that I've noticed so far. Could be wrong. Maybe there's more to him than meets the eye. I don't know. I just feel like he's kind of the same thing as Patty slash Daisy, except Patty slash Daisy has way more personality, is a lot funnier. Asalo just kind of seems boring. It's just really the best way I can put it. But yeah, it is what it is. You can beat Bloom. Bloom's dead now. You kill him here, like outright. And he doesn't have Mjolnir anymore. He got it taken away by Ishtar, so he wasn't able to defend himself. But the that powerful tome is still out there somewhere. You capture the castle, and Seliph and Lewin spend some time talking about Trevant. He talks about how he ambushed him in the Yid Desert, and how it was a cruel ambush and an insult to the honor of a knight like Quan, I believe is what he says, which is, characterizes Lewin, interestingly enough, but it also kind of talks about like, you know, Trevant is a very Machiavellian, like ends justify the means. Like if I'm going to turn my country into the great land I want it to be, I will do whatever it takes, honor be damned, anything like that. He also talks about how this is something actually at the beginning of the chapter I found was interesting. I forgot to write it down. He talks about how they've developed a reputation as sort of like hyenas. That's kind of the word that people use to describe them. They attack in packs and they're very cruel and will, maul their victims brutally. It's something that is brought up more than a couple times. I'm pretty sure at least 3 or 4 characters mention it in describe them as hyenas. But Trevant kind of muses about that and says like, we just kind of did what we had to do to survive. I mean, he's not justifying himself to anyone. I think he's just talking to his family. He's like, people think we're hyenas, but we're just out here trying to make a living for ourselves because we needed to establish ourselves as good mercenaries that people would want to hire and that other people would be afraid of because otherwise we weren't going to make any money to live. Yeah, it's a cool moment seeing this horrible description of them turned on its head and portrayed as like, well, what else were we gonna do? But Trevant proves he's still a son of a bitch by sending Altena and a few of his Wyvern commanders to attack Manster. And Altena's like, oh, I guess this is the first time we're meeting Altena and also Arion. Not Arion isn't very important, but Altena is. I mean, we know who Altena is. She's Quan's and Ethlyn's daughter, who was with them in the desert. Was captured by Trevant when he killed her parents, and now she is kind of his adopted daughter. I believe that she thinks he is her biological father. I'm pretty sure that she does not know that he has adopted her. She certainly doesn't know that she's Quan's daughter, But Altana steps in and says, "Hey, that's not really necessary. There are only civilians there." Manster has been liberated at this point, by the way. Sed has captured it back, basically, and the Empire is out of there. So it's just him, his freedom fighters, and the civilians. Altana's like, we're not like we don't have to go out and kill these civilians. They've lost. It's or the Empire's lost. It wouldn't do anything except provoke unnecessary action. And Travant's like, do it anyway. And she's like, I guess. And they go. Altana actually stays put. She's not willing to do it, but her men stop listening to her because Travant is above her head and he ordered it, so they're like, we don't have to listen to you. Regardless, they go out and attack Manster. So you have to get down there. You really don't have to get down there. Sed is really good. He starts out as a green unit. You can get down there and recruit him with Seliph. And I guess I'll talk about him right now. He's phenomenal. I love him as a character. I've already talked a little bit about him, and we'll have more things to say about him in Thracia. But he's really cool. He's such a badass, and his substitute Hawk, I imagine, is the same way. Hawk is also like way cooler of a name than Sed. I'm just saying. But in terms of gameplay, I mean, it depends on who you made his dad, right? But Sed, I think I described this in Gen 1, but he's more or less idiot proof. He's going to be good basically no matter who his dad is. You can make him better with certain dads. Obviously, his big one, his big daddy, is Lewin. He's the canon dad. He's the one that is most heavily pushed by the story and is also the one that makes him the best because it gives him Forseti, which he can use to single-handedly destroy the entire Wyvern Squadron if he wanted to. But I made Azel his dad, and he's still pretty good. He still has really good speed and magic, and he can use really good tomes. He's just a great unit all around, and he's on foot. So again, kind of like, do you want the trade-off of a foot unit for the payoff of really good combat? Probably not worth it, but he's definitely far from being dead weight. He's not a Salo. He's way better than a Salo. We'll just leave it at that. He also faces down these Draco Knights by himself, which is super cool. And he can beat them all too. And there's a part where he's like, I'm gonna go fight them down, and the civilians are like, you can't just fight an entire squadron of Draco Knights, you'll get destroyed. And he's like, yeah, I know, I just need to buy some time for the Liberation Army to get here. And it's like, nah, dude, you're probably good. You're probably okay. You'd probably wipe them all out, no problem. On your way down, Tinny and Seliph have a conversation, which is great. Actually, I really like this one. They get 100 love points out of it, which I think is weird because there's nothing about it that implies that they're engaging, like they're not even getting to know each other really well. Tinny's just talking to Seliph about Ishtar. She says that she's nice and not like a cruel person or anything. And then they talk about like who was that man with her, and she says, well, it was probably Julius. They're a couple. They're engaged to be married or something like that. So that's who that was probably. And Seliph's like, oh damn, the prince was right there in front of me. I couldn't even do anything. He doesn't say that, but that's what I imagine he's thinking. Oh, and she gives some characterization to Julius here about how he is kind of, she says that he's cold on the inside. He puts on a facade of being warm and charismatic, but when you get to know him, he's actually like really shitty. And she says that if she didn't know any better, she would swear that he isn't even human, which is, it's cool. It's I mean, it's not subtle, but it is nice foreshadowing of how he is a literal reincarnation of Satan. I like it. It gives him an imposing presence. Oh, Nana and Ares have a conversation here, which sort of remedies some of what I was talking about. It raises more questions than it answers, I think. I'll do the TLDR, and I won't talk a lot about it because I went on a whole rant about this last time, but Nana and Ares are talking, and she gives him a letter, which brought to mind again the whole Fates bullshit with the plot letter of how, oh no, don't worry, they're not really your siblings, but that's a complaint for another day. She gives him a letter from, I guess, who was it again? She says, "Hey, are you Eldegon's kid?" He says, "Yes." "I'm Lachesis' daughter," and he says, "Oh, cool." And this is why she came to Leinster. I was actually talking a little bit about that last time. Ares was living in around the Leinster area, and Nana speculates that her mom took Nana to Leinster in order to search for Ares, but came up empty-handed, so decided to cross back to Isaac to meet up with Yarmud and died on the way. That's probably what happened. And then Javaro took him in. This kind of explains like the timeline of events. I don't know how old he was. Yeah, I guess Lachesis gave Nana a letter to. Lachesis gave Nana a letter addressed to Ares for some fucking reason, and explains in detail how Eldegon. It was passed from Eldegon to Lachesis to Nana to Ares. Don't ask me why Ares. Well, Eldegon giving it to Lachesis makes sense. Lachesis giving it to Nana doesn't make any sense. I don't know why he wouldn't just give it to Finn or something, but it's again, I'm not going to get into it. Doesn't matter that much, but it just explains how Eldegon and Sigurd were best friends. Again, a weird thing to explain in a letter. I'm sure that like there's got to be a little bit more to it than that. There's probably like talking about something else, and Sigurd's mentioned incidentally, but it kind of just makes it sound like the whole letter is about how he and Sigurd were best friends, and that's just a weirdly specific thing to write a letter to your son about. And then they just bond a little bit. She does some training, gets some pretty nice stat buffs actually. I think it's like +3 strength, +2 defense, or something like that. Fee and Sid have a conversation. I'm just getting all of them out of the way. They talk a little bit about their mother and their dad and how much of an idiot he is and how they don't understand what his thought process is. But not really much to write home about. It's cute. I like their interactions. Sed and Seleth have another conversation after you've recruited him, if Lewin is his dad, and it is a joy to read. Lewin just pops up and is like, "What's going on?" And Sed's like, "What the fuck are you talking about? You abandoned us. You left my mom to die. You've been missing for years. We've been looking for you. We could have died while looking for you. What the fuck, dude?" And Lewin's like, that's life. Like it's fucking it's sad. They're I kind of they really push this. I've mentioned this before how Aaron and Lewin is a very pushed pairing, but I think it's also pushed in the sense of it also gets you the best character interactions in the entire story. Some of the Sed and Lewin stuff is really good. Lewin's also my one of my favorite characters in the game, definitely my favorite Gen 1 character. So it's yeah, I'm biased, but I think that it's a great pairing for a lot of different reasons, this being one of the big ones. And then really that's really all there is. There's another village over to the east where you can get a thief band. I gave it to Arthur for no particular reason. He was just over there in that area anyway, so I just had him get it. And then yeah, the chapter ends and they just say that they're gonna go invade Thracia. Actually I don't even think that they say that. I think that they're just like the chapter. Yeah, I think they do actually. They say that like okay, now we got to go deal with Trevant and he's strong and we're gonna have to really put our best foot forward if we want to deal with him. And that's the end of the chapter. It's not. It's a very short one. I mean, I'm not even at an hour, and that's with the raw audio that I'm going to cut down significantly. This is going to be probably under an hour long episode, which is nuts because the last one was 2 hours long. But yeah, I mean, it's really is a filler chapter, and I don't necessarily even mean that in a super harsh way. It's just they didn't really want to. It's an excuse to get into Thracia, essentially. That's what it feels like, at least. Um, but yeah, that's it. That's really all there is. So I enjoyed it. I think that in terms of our map gauntlet, it's not even a contender. It was really boring. It was just kind of moving in a straight line. There were parts that I actually did enjoy. I don't think I'd say it's an above average map by this game's standards. So I think that it's wouldn't be like a stretch to say it's maybe in the top five. I guess it's not a big, that's like half the maps in the game. Probably top four, maybe. I don't know. It's a fun map. I enjoyed it, but it's not significantly better than any of the other maps, and it's definitely not any better than Chapter 3. Honestly, it might even be better than Chapter 7. It might be my second favorite map in the game so far because there are things that you have to rush. You have to there are different groups of enemies attacking you at once. I gotta think about this. Maybe is it better than Chapter 3? I don't think so personally, but I could see an argument for it. I think in terms of story, it is comparable. I think that there's a lot of resolution going. I think that the stuff with Ced is really good. I think that some of the stuff with Trevant is amazing. I think that Bloom passing on his Mjolnir and then dying as a result the first time we meet Julius. I think I could see this being better than Chapter 3. I'm gonna stick with my gut and say that Chapter 3 is still better, but I think you can make a solid argument for this being one of the better maps in the game. I enjoyed it. I think that if maybe it was a little bit less boring in the middle, the middle is kind of a lame section, but otherwise it was pretty fun. So yeah, I don't think it beats Chapter 3, but still pretty good. In terms of news, we have no news. Well, that's not entirely true. There is one notable thing that happened this past couple weeks, however long it's been since I did the last one, and that is that the Japanese Nintendo Switch eShop, or I should say Nintendo Switch Online, got Genealogy of the Holy War as a download game because if you pay for Switch Online, you get access to a whole bunch of NES and SNES games, and now the Japanese Switch has Genealogy as one of those games. It's not a lot. It's not even I mean obviously it's not in the States. It would be a pretty big deal if it was localized for the States. But yeah, it's notable. It's good to see that this game is getting some attention. There's been rumors that there's going to be a new game this year. I mean, rumors are all they are as far as I know. There's not a whole lot of actual evidence. Um, but it's fun to speculate, and there's no. It's not like the timing is wrong. When did Three Houses came out in 2019, and Fates came out in 2016. No, actually, it would be Shadows of Valentia. So it'd be 2017 to 2019, 2 years. That's a reasonable amount of time. People are saying it might be a genealogy remake. Again, not a whole lot of actual evidence for that, but it's possible. Three Houses was very clearly inspired by genealogy. There's a lot of similarities in terms of like story themes and concepts with like power laying dormant in bloodlines and uh, the time skip system, stuff like that. People are saying that there might be a genealogy remake that borrows a lot of game mechanics from FE16, which is possible. I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen. I just don't think there's any real reason to think that as of right now. I also don't know. Like, there might be some leaks. I heard that there might be some leaks going around. I don't know anything about the source of those leaks or whether they're reliable or not. We'll see. We're coming up on E3 next month, I believe, so it's definitely possible that we'll see something there. I would love that. Love me some Fire Emblem. I have been playing a few different things. I recently finished off the Danganronpa trilogy, or I guess quadrilogy if you want to count the anime. But tetralogy? I don't know. There's a word for it. But yeah, I'd only played one and two, and I'd watched like the first half of the anime. So a few weeks ago, I polished off the rest of the anime and went back and played V3. I love it. I know V3 is controversial because it has a really, really weird ending that I'm not going to get into even remotely because it's definitely something that if you're even slightly interested in the series, you should check out for yourself. But I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. And I think that the arguments for it being, I mean, obviously, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I think the arguments that people have about it being terrible aren't, like, they don't really hold up to scrutiny, in my opinion, but that's just me. I have been playing a little bit of an RPG series called Trails in the Sky. I'm about probably third of the way through the first game, so just starting out. It's fun. I like it. I like the combat. The biggest problem I typically have with RPGs is that I'm okay with waiting for a story to get good, but the gameplay has to be good while I wait. Or if the gameplay is kind of mid, I can put up with it if the story's really good. Ideally, it would be both good story and good gameplay. Not many JRPGs fall into that category, in my opinion. A few do, but I think definitely Trails in the Sky takes a while for its story to get going. I didn't feel engaged in the story really at all until I was about 6 to 8 hours in, but the gameplay was really fun, so I thought it was fine. I didn't really have a problem with it, and I don't think there was anything else. I watched Demon Slayer. This isn't a game, but I guess since we talked about the Danganronpa anime, I'll talk about this too. I watched like 2/3 of Demon Slayer. I think there's only one season, but the first season, and honestly, did not super care for it. I thought it looked pretty, but I didn't like pretty much any of the characters except for the demon girl, Nezuko. Pretty much everyone likes her, I think, but none of the others really were doing it for me, so I kind of dropped it, I think. But other than that, there's not really anything going on. So I think that that's going to do it for me. Thanks for listening to this pretty short episode. I think it's going to come out, like I said, under an hour. We're actually even under an hour in raw footage, so it's probably going to be closer to like 50 minutes. So yeah, enjoy this short episode. We'll come back next week. I think next week is going to be a bit heftier, or next episode. I keep saying next week. We'll see. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.